नाज़रीन, इस साल ऑरलैंडो फ्लोरिडा में होने वाला अपना कन्वेंशन नहायत ही कामयाब रहा, लेकिन मैं यहाँ बता चलूँ कि इस साल कुछ चीज़ें इसमें शामिल की गई और उनको इंक्लूड किया गया, जिसमें ओपन और अपना ज्वाइंट सेशन। याद रहे, जिस तरह डॉक्टर की बड़ी तंजीम अपना है, इसी तरह से एंटरप्रेन्योर ऑफ पाकिस्तानी अमेरिकन अफेयर्स ओपन, जो सिलिकॉन वैली में बेस्ड है, जिसमें ज़्यादातर लोग आईटी, सेमीकंडक्टर और टेक्नोलॉजी से बहुत बड़ी ऑर्गेनाइजेशन है। अपना और ओपन का मिलाप अपना के लिए एक अहम तरीन इकदाम है। दोनों पाकिस्तानी ओरिजिन ऑर्गेनाइजेशन है, अपने अपने शोबों में अहम किरदार अदा कर रही हैं। इस सिलसिले में अहम पेशरफ्त डॉक्टर नवीद शिरवानी की जानिब से की गई, जिन्होंने डॉक्टर शेखानी से मुलाकात की, और इसमें डॉक्टर नसीम शेखानी और ज़फ़र इकबाल ने अपना की जानिब से अमली जामा पहनाया, और ये सेशन नहायत कामयाबी से मुनक़्क़द हुआ अपना के फ्लोरिडा कन्वेंशन में। याद है, डॉक्टर नवीद शिरवानी अपना के कई प्रोग्रामों में शामिल हुए और उनको सपोर्ट भी किया, और उन्हें सोचा और महसूस किया कि अगर अपना एंड ओपन मिल जाए तो ये एक बहुत बड़ी ताकत बन के उभर सकते हैं। अपना हेल्थ केयर के प्लेटफॉर्म पे बहुत अहम किरदार अदा कर रही है, और ओपन आईटी के प्लेटफॉर्म से नहायत बड़ा किरदार अदा कर रही है, जिन्हें कई बिलियनर और मिलियनर प्रोड्यूस किए हैं। इस वजह से अपना भी पाकिस्तान में और अमेरिका में रह के बहुत अहम तरीन किरदार अदा कर रही है हर लेवल पे। डॉक्टर नवीद शिरवानी ने ये सोचा कि अगर अपना और ओपन एक साथ काम करें तो ये एक बड़ी ताकत बनकर उभर सकती है। ओपन और अपना का जॉइंट सेशन पैनल डिस्कशन कामयाब रहा, जिसमें पाकिस्तान वज़ीर-ए-आज़म के एडवाइज़र जुल्फ़िकार बुखारी ने शिरकत की, चेयरमैन अमेरिकन बिजनेस काउंसिल डॉक्टर महमूद खान, फॉर्मर वाइस चेयरमैन पेप्सी कोला, अपना की जाने से डॉक्टर नसीम शेखानी, और सदर ओपन लोकल एंड ग्लोबल मुबशिर और मौज़म नवीद शिरवानी अपना और ओपन के मेंबर ने बड़ी तादाद में शिरकत की और उसको कामयाबी से इम्तिनार किया। आइए देखते हैं ओपन की ये रिपोर्ट।
First of all, I want to say that I'm a president of Open Silicon Valley chapter, and today we are attending Open Global Retreat. That this is the first time we're doing it with APNA. APNA and Open are the two biggest Pakistani organizations, and I think it's a great initiative to do it together and bring medical field and doctors and technology together, and this hopefully this partnership will produce a lot of new projects and companies and startups. So
I think this is a very good program. I'm in healthcare myself, and I know that for the last 5-6 years, the biggest challenge in healthcare is technology. Everything is going on an EMR system, and every single hospital had to spend about 25% of the revenue in technology. So every doctor is facing this challenge, every hospital is facing this challenge. I think this merger or this co-op will open up a whole lot of new avenues where they will benefit each other.
So yeah, today we have a lot of folks from many chapters, 13 chapters over here, and we are working with APNA over here to find new opportunities, see where we're going with new companies and so on. So a lot of people are basically networking, trying to see what the future holds in terms of new technology that can be applied to the medical field also, and basically create partnerships, joint ventures and so on. So 2.5 days of intensive workshops basically.
That Navaid Shirwani ran for us in terms of transformational or bust technologies in his own inimitable way, and I think there were lots and lots of takeaways there. And then we delved across a whole host of industries, geographies. We heard from people from Pakistan, or some representatives from Europe, and across all of the various chapters, multiple industries. And then, the interlacing with the government representatives. I was saying to someone last night that the two gentlemen who we had didn't look like the traditional government representatives, right? They're the new face, and the conversations that we had, what they shared, I'm not sure some of the things that they said are even public knowledge, which makes it interesting and exciting that they were really at the cutting edge and talking about things that are breaking as we speak.
We have a lot of new faces today. A lot of physicians will be joining us, and this is the reason why we're having this retreat at APNA conference, to combine these, jointly hold these events together, because I strongly believe if we bring these two big communities, the largest communities of professionals, entrepreneurs, and physicians together, magic will happen. And we have experienced this through some initial conversations we've had, and with the conversation we have had in the past couple of days as well, we've seen a lot of interest. I wanted to specifically call out and actually share, because there are a few new faces. Some have asked this question as to what is open. I was told there's an entrepreneur thing happening here, and I wanted to join that. I don't know what this platform Open is. So Open is the Organization of Pakistani Entrepreneurs, and it's the largest network of entrepreneurs and corporate executives across the globe. And I'll show you some stats. These will be conservative numbers that it was a quick exercise that we did just to show you the power of this network. And then APPNA is a huge, amazing network. And you witnessed about 3,000 or 4,000 people, I believe. 3,500 people here at the APPNA conference, and what an amazing show the APPNA leadership put together. So thank you for having us, and thank you for hosting us, and all the support. I would love to also share, how did this even get started? This initiative got started about 2 or 3 years ago. We thought this would be a great idea to do. It took about 2 to 3 years to make it happen, and there are a few champions in the room that made the push and made this happen this year. And without their support, this combination, this collaboration wouldn't have been successful. So number one, first and foremost, Dr. Naseem Shekhani. Thank you. He's the president of APPNA. And the whole show that you saw put together, it's his team that put that wonderful show together. Thank you, Dr. Naseem, for the push, for the support, and believing in this partnership. So thank you for that. Number two, Dr. Zafar. Please stand up. So he has been a great support as well. So Dr. Zafar, Dr. Naseem Shekhani, and a few other physicians, they flew in to Silicon Valley. This was about 3 months ago, and hosted by Dr. Naveed Sherwani. Is Dr. Naveed Sherwani in the room? I saw him. Oh, here. So another individual who was key in bringing all these two organizations together. So he hosted us at his office. We had a 2-day retreat, and by the end of the day, I talked to them the first day that there were entrepreneurs talking to healthcare physicians, and they were having demos by the end of the day. And they were late getting to the dinner invite that we had because there were deals going on or demos going on, and figuring out how can we leverage what you're providing in our healthcare setup. And we knew right there and then that this has to happen, and thank you for making this successful. Now, in the context of answering this question as to what this open global brand is and what this network is, we have 13 chapters, and I want to thank Open Chicago, Horace and his team to go through this exercise. These are conservative numbers, but we wanted to still share with you what this whole brand is. So we have about 350 charter members and 150 executive team members. Now, this does not include our general membership base. That's even more. These are charter members as successful entrepreneurs and corporate executives across the globe that are part of this network. Out of this network, there are about 100 founders, 90 serial entrepreneurs, about 300 plus corporate executives. 75% of them have master's degree and above. The network is about 100,000 people across the globe. And this is the network on our mailing list who have joined our events, who have attended our events, and across all the chapters, and it's a pretty large network. And before doing this exercise, even we didn't know how large a network we had, so it was a great exercise for us to go through. The combined net worth, this is again a guesstimate, and it's about $2 billion plus, 75 plus multi-millionaires, there are 100 millionaires. These are very conservative numbers. This was a quick exercise that we did, but at least it gives you an idea as to where we stand. In the last 2 years, just in the last 2 years, for all the venture initiatives that are taking place within the charter member community, $1 billion plus was raised in venture financing. And lastly, in terms of exits, again, just in the last 2 years, and this is, I already know this is a very low number. Well, not very low number, it's a lower number than what I had in mind, but $10 billion plus exits just in the last year and a half or 2 years within this 350 open charter member base. So this is an amazing network of entrepreneurs and corporate executives. I strongly believe, and I've mentioned this over and over again, it's an amazing platform, not utilized to its full potential. So that's where the ask to you all is, one, we love to partner with APPNA. We want physicians to connect with us, or most of the physicians are entrepreneurs in their own capacity, running their own healthcare setup. We want to help scale them. We want to leverage, partner with them and figure out how we can extend it even further. And so this partnership, I think, would go really a long way. And another initiative was to leverage your help if you want to have an open chapter in your region, because 3 or 4 individuals came from different cities and they said, I love this, I want to have an open chapter in my region, how can I do that? Right? Please reach out to us. We'll be happy to sit down with you and share with you how we start our chapters and how you can tap into this amazing network. With that, thank you again all for joining. The halwa puri is outside, and I'll have my breakfast now after this talk. I want to invite our MC for today, Farooq Bagani, who is the president of Open Southern California. Please, Farooq.
Thank you, Mozam. So I just wanted to take a quick second, and I started with SoCal a couple of years ago, and I fell into something and I didn't realize what I was falling into. So I wanted to take a moment to acknowledge Mozam for all his effort in getting this together. Not an easy task. So good morning, everybody. I'm not as bright-eyed and bushy-tailed as I usually am, because the thing I liked about this event is I walked around at 2 a.m. and it looked like it was 2 in the afternoon. Boy, you medical types have some energy. I'll give you that. Excellent event, very well organized. Our usual open events by 11 p.m. we're asleep. Here, we're waking up and getting ready to party. So anyways, I did want to just take a minute and, we have a very esteemed guest, and this is close to me because I've worked with a company that this gentleman took to another level. And what's really an interesting fact is at one point this company was completely dominated by people from the subcontinent for many years, which is a great source of pride for me personally, having worked with this company. So I wanted to introduce Dr. Mahmood Khan. Very interesting legacy that he has. The most interesting I find is that he flies his grandkids around in a Citation CJ3. I'm going to London later. Can you give me a lift? In any case, just to give you a little background on him, he's an endocrinologist by training, did his fellowship in the UK, then did his PhD in biochemistry, biolife sciences, became the head of research for Takeda, and then eventually became the vice chairman of PepsiCo, which, as all of you know, and I have worked with them, are a very innovative and unique company. Now he's moved along. He's now the CEO of Life Biosciences, sits on the board of Indigo Agriculture, and has had many, many interactions and keeps a very close connectivity to the Pakistani community. He was the chairman of the US-Pakistan Business Council, and he's going to give us a little insight on his journey today. So I'd like to welcome Dr. Mahmood Khan.
So I thank you very much, first of all. I am shocked, not just amazed, at after the performance last night, to be up at 2, 3, 4 in the morning, some people, and you're here. I mean, what is this? We must have a group of insomniacs or something, but I am delighted to be able to address you this morning. I want to echo what has been said. Perhaps we sometimes forget that we attend meetings like this, whether it's open or APPNA. People who actually do all the work have a full-time job, and they volunteer for all of this. And it's through that volunteering that these organizations, these events can actually happen, and the rest of us who turn up, yeah, we buy a ticket, have done very, very little towards making it a success except for attending. The real people are the people who actually stand up and say, we'll do this. So hats off to all of you. When you get to my point in my career, it really doesn't matter what you've done because it's history. What I want to talk about today is as much to our next generation and not talk about what it took, because that is history. The world has changed, but how to think about what it will take. And that's an important difference. It is not saying, one thing I will tell you is never try and emulate a career. A career was successful. Mentors are there to guide, but you're not to copy their careers, because the world completely changes in that time period. And if you try and copy what you've done, and I've seen this go wrong in academia, way too many graduate students and postdocs work in a lab, they learn something, and they try and repeat that over and over again, only to fail. Because what made their professor successful was the inventions or innovations they were having that actually are no longer relevant anymore. And that's the worst thing you can do. The second, and I had the chance of speaking in Switzerland at Innovation Frontiers recently, and some of this, you just Googled, it's mostly on YouTube one way or another. And there's an important distinction between invention and innovation. And we talked yesterday a lot about innovation. And for the physicians in this room, and those who are more in an academic environment, an invention and an innovation is not the same thing. An invention is something which you come up with an idea. It may be an object, it may be a new discovery, drug, it may be a new process, it may be a new software, it doesn't really matter. It remains an invention when you file a patent, you publish a paper. Those are all inventions. They do not make any difference in anybody's life except for your resume. It's the only benefit to society. It becomes an innovation when that invention makes a difference in somebody's life. When that invention makes that difference in somebody's life, it is now an innovation. And there are several levels of innovation, and I've had the fortune and privilege of working in large and small ecosystems, but most of my career has been, quote, leading innovations. My favorite reflection on my career is I've never had a good idea in my life. I've had the fortune of recognizing good ideas from other people, and your job as a leader is not to come up with good ideas, but have the ability to recognize a good idea and back it. And when you do that, you will have a very successful career. So the key here is the ability to listen, observe, pay attention, and then back those horses, because the odds are 99% of the things that will affect the world will not be your ideas, but they'll be the ideas of people around you. Which means, and I think this is very important, you have to surround yourself with optimists. Way too often, and even at this meeting, I had a few meetings, and you see this pessimistic view of the world. And you know, Pakistanis love surrounding themselves with a bit of that. But the pessimistic view is good to listen to give you objectivity, but don't let it overwhelm you and surround you with it, because you will never make any progress. The whole idea of innovation is to have optimism that you can change something. And if you're going to change something, you're going to listen to that optimistic view and say, all right, what can I do now to further this optimistic perspective as opposed to be dragged down by the pessimistic? And we talk about, you know, this generational difference of a younger generation always being more optimistic than the older generation. You know, these old gray-haired guys, you know, they're living in the past. We're the young, we're going to disrupt everything and disrupt the world and disrupt the family and disrupt everything we touch. Well, I hate to tell you this, but we were young once too. And we went through that, we're going to disrupt the world. I went through college, junior college, with a slide rule. Some of you might remember what a slide rule is. Some of you might actually have seen one, and there's been loads in this room who have never even seen one. And that slide rule eventually, you know, I thought I was the bee's knees when I got a calculator that could do square roots. Remember those? This was a matter of pride. This calculator could do square roots, as opposed to those log tables. And then we went from that, and somebody yesterday used this buzzword, AI. AI is going to disrupt the world. Well, when we went from accounting books to an Excel spreadsheet, that was supposed to disrupt the world. And we went from spreadsheets to relational databases, and suddenly we could actually interrogate data sets through that relational database, and we could do things we couldn't. And those of us who were doing research, searching using citation indices, suddenly could do it online. What's my point? The tools will continue to change. Those of you who are AI gurus today are going to be really hot, and 10 years from now, that will be the Excel spreadsheet, and the world will move on. The tools will continue to change. Do not anchor yourself in those tools. I've had 35 years in my career. Believe me, the tools will change. What will make you leaders is what I want to talk about, because there's innovation of a tool, and that will remain more inventions than anything else. And then there's real innovation when you actually start to think about systems. And you will use those tools to solve system problems as opposed to use tools for their own sake. So while I'm impressed with AI, while I'm impressed with that tool, I am relatively no more impressed than when the first relational databases came along and Oracle was invented. Those were great, those are great companies. Microsoft solved a problem, created a tool, and gave the world PCs. And while Apple may not be that innovative in some people's mind, but it gave us the mouse, and yes, they didn't invent it, but the ability to interact with a computer, other than have to type in code, was highly innovative. And it is the basis of all of the aggregate of those tools that are now letting you generate the next generation. Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
So don't confuse these things. I have the privilege, some of you may not have ever heard of an organization called NIST, the National Institute of Standards and Technology. That is the beauty of the United States. NIST oversees 97% of all US exports. And 90% of the Americans have never heard of it. What does NIST do? Well, for those of you, who in here is from software industry? Anybody? The next time you read, you look at your Internet Cybersecurity Protocol, that was developed by NIST. The next time you measure something like weight, like a kilogram, that standard was defined by NIST. When you measure a volt, an amp, a liter, anything like that, it's NIST. When you measure a second, the time, it is standardized by NIST. Why is that important? And I'll come to the ecosystem in a minute. Why is that important? Because for the first time in history, in hundreds of years, weight was always done as a relative measure. I don't know if you know this, but there was actually a kilogram sitting in France, based on which every unit of weight in the world was referred to. And if you wanted to settle 3x. Don't kid yourselves. There's two types of innovation. There's fundamental innovation, which redefines a whole discipline. And then there's innovation, which is really what I call emulating, which is you take a standard and you say, I will figure out how to apply it in my domain. That is not true innovation. That is essentially adopting what already exists. And so one country may leapfrog another country in deployment and implementation, which has nothing to do with innovation. It's the fact that there's an installed capital base, and its fiscal responsibility is to know where you want to put the next S-curve and invest behind, versus solving whether I can get the hotel reservation on the phone, or do you really want to redefine the fundamental definition of time in absolute terms? And you might say, well, what the heck, why do I care? Because if you can put a light-based clock in every device on the planet, suddenly you can measure light in precision that we've never imagined, which means you will have the next generation of navigation, GPS, the next generation of operating systems, the next generation of sensors, etc. And that is being done in this country. NIST has just announced the next generation of portable light-based clocks that has never been invented before. And that will open up a whole new industry based on sensors and mechanisms that we have never been able to imagine before. Imagine a clock that's measured on light, photons, versus electrons. That's the difference. And so, never look at what you see immediately as the definition of what is innovative, but really string it together and look to the future. You say, suddenly, you start to realize this. I didn't quite appreciate this, and the other thing I'll share with you about my work in Washington is back when President Reagan was in the presidency, the Japanese were a threat to this country. That was the threat. It wasn't China. Those of us who are old enough, go back to the 70s, and the biggest threat in this country was Japan. And so President Reagan appointed at the time the CEO of Hewlett-Packard and said, you must now bring together in Washington what they at that time called the U.S. Council for Competitiveness. And the U.S. Council was brought together. They brought 50 university presidents together. You name the university. Those of you from California, UC Berkeley. Those of you from Boston, you name it, Harvard, MIT, those presidents, Cornell, Columbia, et cetera, Carnegie Mellon, all of these presidents of the universities came together. There are 13 national labs in this country. The 13 national labs are the labs that actually drive the fundamental strategic research for the United States. To give you some idea, for those of you who are doing research, 60% of the entire country's budget funds all the universities and everything else, and 40% of the US federal budget for research funds those 13 labs. As an example, every weather prediction model in the world is using the model that was developed by the Lawrence Livermore Lab in California. It is also the lab that tests and virtually tests the US nuclear arsenal, et cetera, et cetera. 13 directors of the national labs were brought together, and then 50 CEOs came together. Again, name the corporation that were there. And that council has been working in a very unique way to bridge federal research, academic institutions, and the leading innovative companies of this country. And it is through that forum that we actually can strategically bridge the strategic research and innovation of this country, and in many ways the world. Why am I actually sharing that? Because my experience there is that I served as vice chair of that US Council for a number of years. There are 3 vice chairs, one for academia, one for industry, and one for the national labs. The current vice chair of the national labs is the director of the Pacific Northwest Lab. Many of you are IT people. This is the federal lab that does most of the software research as a national lab. The current vice chair for industry is Brian Moynihan. For those of you who are in the finance industry, he's the CEO of Bank of America. And the vice chair for academia is Michael Crow, former provost of Columbia, currently president of ASU. Do you know who the US chairman is for the US Council? It's a Pakistani, Mahmood Khan. When was the last time Fox News said that it's actually a Pakistani steering the US Council of Strategic Competitive Initiatives? Why doesn't Fox News report that? Right? We know the answer to that. But my point is to hopefully inspire this next generation to say, well, the next time somebody tells you there's a ceiling, this administration, I'm Muslim, by the way, I said this a couple of days ago, you come to my office and you'll see Bismillah, you'll see Assalamu Alaikum, and everybody and their uncle knows I'm Pakistani and I'm Muslim and I'm very proud of it. It does not change the strategic nature of the work I do. The next thing I want to talk about, and I'm going to leave about 30 minutes hopefully for your Q&A, is systems level thinking. Let me give some examples. There's iterative innovation. Intel is a great example of that. Intel grew because every couple of years it came up with a faster chip. Remember those of us in those days, we wanted the Pentium, then we wanted the Hexium, and your bragging rights was which chip you had in your computer, right? Yeah. And every couple of years, and you didn't care what brand it was the chip in that. And that was what Intel was doing. It was doing iterative research. It was making it faster, better, everything got better and better, but that was iterative. Then there's innovation that changes the way in which we do things. Many examples of that. But the internet changed the way we do things. It didn't change what we do, it changed the way we did it. Who out of you now goes to a travel agent? Who out of you now goes to the library? Who out of you goes to searching your research thesis? All of that, you're still doing the research, you're still booking your travel, you're still doing all that, we're doing it differently. That is transformative research and transformation innovation that changes the way in which we do things. You're still doing the same thing. You think you're doing something different, but you're not. You're still flying that plane, you're still booking a ticket, you're just doing it differently. And whole industries got created out of that. The third level is the interaction between us as humans and our environment. That has changed. And it's been changing with the invention of machines. And those machines have been getting smarter, smaller, and interacting in different ways. Handheld, phones are an example of that. But we're still doing what we always did. We're interacting with our environment just through a different device. Believe me, when the first astronomers invented the telescope, they invented a machine that allowed you to interact with the universe in a different way. Your handheld is the same. It's a tool which is an extension of your own senses. And I want to add a word of caution here for those of you who think, we're brilliant, we're all going to be made obsolete by all these machines. Do you know that when the telephone was invented, the prediction was that universities would be obsolete? Because now you could actually teach somebody whatever they wanted with books, so they could phone the professor and get the answers to their homework. And when Alexander Bell invented the phone, university presidents were told you're done. That is a fact. And yet, 200 years later, universities are vibrant ecosystems using different tools. Now, why do I say that? Where's the next frontier? One of the things that I get asked commonly is, given all the different things you do, what is the next frontier? I'm going to give you a couple of examples. I touched on this at the Alliance dinner, but I'm going to elaborate a bit more. We have 7 billion people on the planet today. About 1 billion are hungry. By 2050, about 30 years from now, there'll be 2 billion, 2.5 billion more humans. No more water to add, no more land to add, diminishing yield per acre. And the pessimistic view is with 3.5 billion people potentially that need food, at least 2 billion will be hungry. And vast majority of wars in the world today are over the access rights to water. They're not for any other reason. Israel-Palestine conflict is over access to the Jordan River. Maybe disguised as anything else, but Israel needs water, the Jordan River has water, and the aquifers below the occupied territories are the access to water. Kashmir is about water. I can go on and on, but it is access to water, therefore it is access to irrigation, because 80% of the world's fresh water is used for irrigation, and so it's access to food. Pessimists will say we're going to have a lot of hungry people, there's going to be more conflict. The optimists would say, can we use technology to fix this? I started a little experiment about 6 years ago at PepsiCo. And I asked the question, what would it take if we deployed every technology we have available today, so not a single new thing is going to be invented. Just take off-the-shelf technology. Sensors, predictive models, satellite imaging, you name it. If we put it all together and we start doing an experiment, and I had the team pick the southeast of England, where we have a lot of potato farm, and the southeast of England actually is going through a very significant drought right now. So in the southeast of England, we have all these potato farms. We said, work with Cambridge University, the other Cambridge, not the one in Boston, and the Cambridge University, and said, can we deploy everything and we'll set a target? You know, when you're the old man in this corner office, you can have crazy ideas, you send these memos around. The young scientist in the organization goes, the old man must have had a free weekend this weekend. And we send this out, and I said, listen, I want you to deploy everything you've got, and in 5 years, I want you to cut the water use by 50%. And I want you to cut the fertilizer use by 50%. But I don't want yield to go down. That was the task. And one of the things, what's the message here? As a leader, be very, very clear in your ask. I was only asking for 3 things. Cut water use by half, cut fertilizer use by half, and do not decrease the yield. Now you go out and figure it out as to how to do it. That's the power of that young generation of innovative thinkers. All you have to do is set the clear target, and we did. 4 years and 11 months later, they came back to me and said, Dr. Khan, we cut the water use by more than half, we cut the nitrogen use by more than half, but actually the yield went up. We just reported that last year, at the end of last year. Why was that? Because with precision targeting, with precision agriculture, with precision deployment, with sensors, with imaging predictive models, all of that deployed, we could actually do that. What's the implication of that if you scale that now? If you scale that and have access to that technology in sub-Saharan Africa, in Southeast Asia, you could actually keep the yield of our crops the same and cut water use by half, or use the same amount of water and boost the yield by 20, 30-some%. Around the same time, I came across an innovative company that was just starting called Indigo Agriculture. Anybody here from MIT? So at MIT, their top innovation prize is a prize called the Lemelson Prize, right? I was one of the 6 judges of the Lemelson Prize at MIT a few years ago. I served for 6 years as a judge at MIT. I was not good enough to get in as a student, but they allowed me to judge. That's a different story. And one of the graduate students came up with the idea that if we harnessed the microbiome that exists in nature in the soil and actually partner that with seed crops, we could use the microbiome to fertilize its own seed by selecting the right variety of bacteria and coating the seed at the time prior to germination. Create a lot of IP in the coating technology and the genuses and all the rest of it. At Indigo, we started doing that. By the way, the valuation of the company at the time was about 200 million privately. We raised a small amount of money, the usual venture stuff. And everybody thought, oh yeah, I eat probiotic yogurt, I know this stuff. And the microbiome platform was launched. And the point I want to teach here is platform. However, on its own, it wasn't good enough because you needed to actually get the right soil environment, because microbiomes are very specific to the ecosystem, et cetera, et cetera. I won't bore you with all those details. And the company got going. With publicly available satellite imaging, created the models to actually look at the Earth, identify the fields, and couple that with biology and the microbiome, and created seeds. And the first wave of plantations showed a 15% increase in cotton yield. The second wave was wheat, the third was corn, we're now working on soy. And the yield increases are between 15 to 30%. The greatest increase occurs in those areas with a drought. Because the microbiome actually can signal the cell and the seed of how to adapt to its environment. Nature is an amazing thing. The bacteria actually are signaling agents for the biology of the seed that's going to germinate and allows it to adapt its biology relative to the environment it's going to actually germinate in. The bacteria see it before the seed does. I'm simplifying, but the point here is, our last round, if you look at, any of you follow CNBC's list of most disruptive companies? Look last month. Indigo Ag was the #1 most disruptive company in the world. And none of you probably have ever heard of it. And that's the point I want to make. Our last round valuation was just under $5 billion. We're getting ready for an IPO. You can imagine the size of that IPO. I have the privilege of being chair of the Science Committee and Technology Committee of the board of Indigo. What is my point? The future innovation is going to occur, and real disruption is not adapting what already exists but in your own ecosystem, but is actually thinking about how to integrate different frontiers. I gave you satellite imaging and data to the microbiology and microbiome and plant biology all into one. The most successful careers, my friends, will be those individuals who can master at least 2 disciplines and bring them together. My challenge to you at Open yesterday was, it was so narrow a discussion because everybody was from the IT industry. That is a very small part of the global innovation ecosystem, and it's going to have the smallest impact because the real measure, the world's biggest industry is agriculture. The world's biggest need is food and water, followed by the field that I'm in, and I'll end with that, which is aging biology. For the first time in the history of mankind, there are more people over the age of 65 than there are under the age of 2. And that will continue, which means in a society which is on a pay-forward system, which we are. Pakistan, you pay forward, your children take care of their last generation. In this, Social Security is paid for today for those who were from the past. It's a pay-forward society across the world. In a pay-forward society, when there are diminishing people who are under the age of 25 over time, and an expanding population of over 65, let me give you a scary statistic. What do you think is the most costly disease in North America, in dollar terms?
Cancer.
Sorry?
Cancer.
Not even close.
End of life care.
I'm sorry?
End of life care.
Alzheimer's.
Might be addiction.
Let me give you the statistics on Alzheimer's. And it is the impact. Because for every person with Alzheimer's, there's somebody taking care of that person. By the way, if it's a family member, 65% of the time it will be a woman, and 60% of those women will be a daughter. Those of you who don't have a daughter, start planning quickly. That daughter, that woman who's taking care of that last generation is not engaged in the economy. For every hour she's spending taking care of a parent, she's not contributing in her family, her own children, in a way. So this has a powerful domino effect. The odds of getting Alzheimer's doubles every 5 years after the age of 65, and at 80, it is almost 50% of the country has degrees of dementia. And that's what's coming, as an example. So you want to take on grand challenges? Ask yourselves how you can play in that system innovation and really, you won't solve the whole thing. But what's powerful about the United States, and I started my conversation on NIST and the US Council, is the US has the ability, regardless of politics, to integrate its systems, to integrate its institutions, and actually create wave after wave after wave of disruptive technology. I just gave you one that has the potential to change the world's agricultural system. Okay? So, my concluding statement is, surround yourself with optimists. There will be challenges. Think of the frontiers of your discipline, but ideally cross over to new disciplines. I was really disappointed once when I left practicing medicine. I was a practicing endocrinologist and a professor at the Mayo Clinic. And I stepped down to take on the next challenge, and my father said, "Beta, kya ho gaya?" He really thought I'd lost my license, I'd pissed somebody off. He couldn't understand why, at the peak of what he thought of a profession, and I wanted to pursue my own passion, not that of my parents' generation. So for those of you as parents, let's leave Pakistan behind. Let our children flourish. Let them explore disciplines and frontiers that we never might have imagined. Because it'll be all of those coupled with our own that are going to make our future better, not theirs. It is our future better. Because if they're successful, that generation will be able to support us. Thank you very much.
I had the opportunity to hear from Sayyid Zulfikar Bukhari in his role as the Minister for Overseas Pakistanis. And we now have the pleasure of hearing from Ali Jahangir Siddiqui, who all of you know well from his most recent appointment as Ambassador of Pakistan to the US. But most recently, those of you who live under a rock, he was named in June this year as the Ambassador at Large for Investments to Pakistan. And in that capacity, I'm sure this forum and group is of interest to him. We also have heard through the last couple of days the importance of the diaspora community that the current government is very focused on. So what we'll do is we'll give Ali the floor. By the way, on very short notice, I want to thank him because he took a long flight from Dubai to get here earlier this afternoon, and appreciate that you're joining us here for this dialogue. So about 7 to 10 minutes, and that will give time to Sayyid Zulfikar Bukhari, who's on his way in, and when both of you are in, I'll have my colleague Akif Ahmed lead you guys and facilitate a Q&A with the group.
First, I just want to check how many people are here who were with me when I spoke in Connecticut last year? Are there a lot of people? Okay, good. Good. So we have some data from that conversation that I'll be recapping later on. In that conversation, we spoke about, from an investment perspective, we spoke about the stock market, we spoke about the foreign exchange rate, we spoke about IMF and the possibility and the need for reform. So that conversation was probably 8 months ago.
It was about a year ago.
About a year ago. So fast forward 1 year, we can recap some of those ideas. I'd also been asked a question in that conversation about whether and how you should invest in Pakistan, the answer I gave you was to wait, which wasn't an easy answer to give for someone who was ambassador to the US at the time and whose job was to promote investment into Pakistan. But the important thing is for us to be truthful. And the truth was that the thesis that we discussed, all of us together, was that there's a great need for reform in Pakistan. There's a great need for reform because successive governments over the last 20 years have been irresponsible in how our finances were managed. For a long time, the government had too much involvement in the markets and currency rates and how things were allocated, and that led to every 5 or 7 years some kind of crisis where the currency depreciated rapidly, and then there was a period of stabilization. And if one were going to ask when is the right time to invest, it was once that period of stabilization had started. A year ago when we spoke, that period of stabilization had not started. The government had just changed, and there was some talk of reform, but that process had not begun. As you know, I asked, for those of you who were present, to wait. Currency rates were, the rupee was a lot different from where it is now, much more expensive, so it's depreciated quite a bit now. There were questions around what the right numbers are. And then we spoke about when there is stabilization, when a reform program is agreed, like an IMF program, then that's the right time for you to invest. So today, where we are is, the currency is where it is, close to 155 or thereabouts. The government has signed and the IMF has approved a package for the government, which will be drawn over 39 months. But with just the money that they're giving come a lot of conditionalities. And those conditionalities are ones that will force us to be more responsible. Now, I was asked in our last conversation whether an IMF program is a really bad idea, because that's usually how people perceive it. But the reality is that all reform is painful. And the point that the government felt was very important was to do some reform. The IMF program is one form of reform. It's extremely painful, but it has to be done. And in the absence of any alternates, we went ahead and we signed that program, and now we're starting that stabilization phase. So I would argue that unlike 1 year ago, today, without this being self-serving, because my new role in the government is to attract investment, but today it's a very good time to be investing in the country. Those are my basic comments. I was asked last time around about sectors, about where one should put their money, and I think for yourselves, for Pakistani Americans and entrepreneurs, I would say you should break this up into 2 areas. One, into businesses you already are invested into in this country. Businesses that you understand. You should look at the opportunities in Pakistan for the same businesses. If your business owns, retail stores or pipelines, or you do technology, then you should look at the same sector because you are best positioned to understand that. And the second area is that there are many businesses in Pakistan that are indexed to the dollar. And for you, returns should be dollarized, or at least indexed to the dollar. So you should be in businesses where the returns you receive back are dollarized. And some of those sectors are, for example, in transportation, in port terminals. So if you invest in the port sector, whether you invest in the stock market and there are companies that are listed that are in the port sector, or whether you are in that business, so you decide to invest in a ports business in Pakistan. When I was in my previous job here in Washington, we had Cargill make a further investment in Pakistan in the port sector, the agricultural port sector. So that entire sector is dollarized because the price they charge per ton of cargo moved in a port, it's a rupee price, but it's based off a dollarized number. So if they charge $5 a ton, you pay in rupees, but it's a dollarized number. So every time the dollar appreciates in value, it's worth more in rupees. So it's, you as a foreign investor don't have a problem investing in that sector. There's aviation and airlines and services to do with airlines and baggage handling, etc. There's shipping and shipping services. All of these are sectors where returns are effectively dollarized. And if you were there in Connecticut, I presented a case of a port terminal in Pakistan and many such other investments, all of whom returned about 25% on an IRR basis, on a long-term returns basis in dollar terms to their investors. So very healthy rates of return over long periods of time, over different economic cycles in Pakistan. Then is the energy business. And I don't know how many people in Open are in the energy business, but regardless of what part of the energy chain you're involved in, whether it's upstream energy, drilling for oil and gas, whether it's marketing of petroleum, all of those businesses are growing quite rapidly. And that's because we have, as you know, a very large population. Even with low GDP growth, we still grow petroleum demand very fast. And petroleum is a product that's again dollarized. So the price of oil is in dollars. If you make 5% as a margin on that dollarized price, you'll always make more and more money, regardless of where the currency goes. I'm not saying that the currency is weak. Once it stabilizes, you'll have a predictable rate at which the currency depreciates. But I think from a policy perspective, my own view is that a country like Pakistan should run currency policy on a free market basis where the currency is cheaper than our competitors. So we export textiles. Bangladesh and Sri Lanka compete with us. For many, many years, their currency was relatively cheaper compared to the Pakistani rupee. That meant if our fair value was 100, those countries ran a policy for their own currencies that were relatively cheaper. That meant that their exports were more competitive. And in the long run, I believe, and this is not government policy, this is my view, in the long run, Pakistan should run a cheaper currency policy. And if we do that, our exports will benefit. But what that means to you as investors from the US is that if you're exposed to businesses in Pakistan that are effectively dollarized, then you will not have that currency exposure issue. I think I wasn't there in the morning, I arrived this afternoon, but I believe the Special Assistant, Mr. Bukhari, spoke about hospitality and tourism. That is a priority sector for the government. Not only are some part of those returns effectively dollarized, but also there's such a shortage of supply that if you were to invest in that sector, I know many people here are in the hospitality and business, if you were to invest in that sector, you would have very little competition. And I think all of you know that. For a long, long time, we've had the same 5-star hotels, the same 4 or 5 5-star hotels across the country. If you step down several layers below that, we have almost no hospitality product. So I think, again, hospitality is a great sector to be in. And of course, I know lots of people here are from technology. And that, of course, is something where you have great skills. And Pakistan has some talent. And today, we have companies coming out of that sector that are really globally relevant businesses. I know that Kareem was presenting earlier today, so you heard their story. A big part of Kareem was their Pakistan business, and that story is very much from a management perspective of Pakistani business. There are companies like Affinity. By way of disclosure, I serve on their advisory board, but for those of you that know that business, it's a successful AI company on a global scale. So there are these companies coming out of Pakistan. We clearly have talent. We may still need the top leadership and the top design people to be from abroad, but in terms of just raw talent, we have plenty of it, and if you can harness that in technology businesses, I think you would find that Pakistan is a phenomenal place to do that. Linked to IT-enabled services, a business that has not yet been successful on a large scale in Pakistan is outsourced services. So there are call centers, and there are some small businesses that do outsourced accounting, back office accounting, and billing work, but there are no large-scale businesses of that type. And for those of you who work for the big accounting firms, Accenture and BDO and so on, this is a huge business for these corporations. And if you can convince your organizations to work internally and to come to Pakistan and build those businesses, you already have the customer bases which outsource to you, and we have the talent. So to the extent that Pakistan's policies are less competitive than centers where you currently operate from, like Bangalore, we can obviously as a government make those adjustments. We're quite keen to do that. But we think there's huge scope, and Pakistan is a much lower priced but same value market as Poland or India, or Philippines, etc. So we've been successful in call centers, but not so successful in many areas beyond that are more value add. So those are some of the sectors that I thought I would mention, but I'll be very, very pleased to take your questions. Thank you.
Thank you.
You served as our ambassador, and that term completed, and you had a chance to go back to the private sector. You've been very successful in the private sector. And then this opportunity came up, and you came back to government and public service. Can you just talk about why you chose to do that and why this position?
So just for clarity, I think many people are aware, my term ended prematurely, for those of you who are aware, and quickly. But then I went back to a business I started. I'm an entrepreneur like yourselves, as I said. And then I suffer from a guilt complex of being privileged. Like many of you, I grew up in Pakistan, and I would go to school every morning at 7 o'clock, and at this traffic light, I would be in a car, and there would be kids my age who would be begging. And those harrowing images never left me. I think about them all the time, and I have some sort of burden of being privileged and trying to figure out why God decided that I would be born in a certain family and another child would not. So I suppose I feel that if you have the ability, you should try and reset that. And if you have the ability, whether it's a financial ability or a skill ability, and you have empathy, then it's incumbent on you, it's an obligation from God that you should try to rebalance that. So that's why I came into government the first time around. I was recruited by the former Prime Minister, and I accepted, and then this time around, I was given the opportunity to say, well, the government would like you to take a different role. It was quite disruptive because life is, I had to move countries and all that stuff. So, but my wife is quite supportive, and at the end of that process, we agreed that I would go back to government.
Ambassador, so this is a new position. It didn't exist before. Can you talk about how it fits into the construct of the bureaucracy and what you hope to accomplish in it over the next few years?
My job is to report to the Prime Minister on negotiating large transactions. So we have a board of investment that you may be familiar with, which is a department of government whose job it is to attract investment into Pakistan in general. So their role includes investment promotion by publishing documents and also holding conferences. Then their role includes licensing of special economic zones. The Board of Investment is responsible for dealing with investor complaints and the ease of doing business competitiveness indices all over the world. So my role is not that. So those things are covered by them. My role is to negotiate directly with corporations, negotiate directly with governments, to do large transactions for the government. So I'm, to put it another way, I'm the investment banker to the government, or for the government. So if we were to do a trade treaty with the country, in addition to the Ministry of Commerce, I would be involved in negotiating that treaty. Or if we are going to do a bilateral deal where the United States would encourage US companies and specific large companies to invest into Pakistan, then I would step up as their counterpart. So these would be very large transactions, and my job is really transactional, i.e. to start something complicated where someone else is interested, and then complete that process so we deliver a result that's measurable, i.e. an investment.
Wonderful. This taps into your experience as a business person quite nicely. So you've been in the US in this position now, you have engaged institutions and individuals. What are the top 3 questions or concerns that come up that you have to be able to respond to begin to attract investment into Pakistan?
So I think, may I address this slightly differently? I think that there is a problem that we try to address, which is a problem where all large corporations around the world, the US included, have a view that's quite a big step up for us if we're able to achieve it. And that is a problem of relevance. Large US corporations and large global corporations are so big that the Pakistan market, no matter what we think of it, 210 million people, $300 billion of GDP, those numbers are quite small for these large companies. I think once we get beyond the fact that these numbers are small, but we still are attractive in the sectors that those companies operate in, we end up with a problem of laws. So there are many regulations and laws that global companies require you to have implemented. If a tech company, a global tech company, is going to be opening up in Pakistan, they do have laws that govern, kind of how you treat people, etc., beyond our labor laws that are quite relevant, but we may not, because we're a young country, we're only 72 years old, we have not modified our laws as per their latest requirements. We may have modified our laws and complied with those requirements as far as manufacturing is concerned, because we do export to the EU and the US and we have to do that, but we may not have complied as far as technology is concerned. So there are large numbers of distortions. Then of course we have internal issues in terms of distortions. We have the provinces post the 18th Amendment were given lots of power. Rightly so, but that also means that these provinces are now taxing differently. Some provinces have different rates at which they tax companies. If you're an e-commerce company, sometimes questions arise about, if you shipped a good from Karachi to Lahore, both provinces try to apply sales tax on that. So I think we try to deal with those sorts of issues. They're quite specific, but the first problem is a problem that we solve for relevance.
Why first world or developed countries succeed is because the institutions are strong. Board of Investments now has got a new chairman. We are creating different kind of windows, let it be for tourism, let it be for FDI, let it be for overseas Pakistanis, let it be for local businesses. We're creating new free economic zones, tourism economic zones. So all these things are only going to come by because we're trying to basically pocket areas and eliminate all the difficulties that we face, let alone you when you invest. But even within the government, if I give you an example of tourism, because we're talking about it, but in KPK you have tourism, you have a beautiful location up in the Galiyat areas, which is the mountainous areas of KPK. And if you want to open a resort there, you have around 80 different NOCs that you require to open this resort or this thing up. 80 NOCs could take you effectively 5 years in Pakistan to get past. Already we're down to around 42. So now it's only 42, and what we're trying to do is create zones so that we don't have to go to the forest department, we don't have to go to the development department, the sewage department, electricity department. We call it a particular zone that we're going to put under the tourism authority, basically, and that tourism authority is going to hold the authority in entirety of the entire zone. So you'll only be dealing with one authority that has the ability to grant you that one NOC, which has everything entitled within it. So we're doing that in tourism. We're trying to take that into business, and that will be governed, hopefully, by the BOI is what we want it to be through their one-stop shop. As when we came, we talked about security. We must understand that despite what a lot of Western media likes to portray, Pakistan's been one of the biggest victims in the war of terror. And unfortunately, it probably over the years has had a cocktail of various sort of terrorist organizations and groups that sort of had a hub.
At At Arkansas Spine and Pain, we love being a part of the family that is our great state. Our mission is to help every family we can live pain-free lives so you can get back to taking hikes, walking the dog, giving your kids and grandkids piggyback rides. Give us a call today at Arkansas Spine and Pain and get out of the cycle of agony you're in. You deserve to get your life back ASAP.
Kaba Fusion is a pharmacist-owned, patient-focused team of professionals with over 30 years' experience providing intravenous medication to patients in the comfort of their own home. Founded by Dr. Sohail Masood, Kaba Fusion has 7 state-of-the-art pharmacies located across the country. Visit us at kabafusion.com to learn more about the benefits of in-home infusion therapy.
क्या आपका H1 वीजा रिफ्यूज हो गया है? आप अमेरिका में काम करने के ख्वाहिशमंद हैं? क्या आप अमेरिका में सुकूनत इख्तियार करना चाहते हैं?
Hi, my name is Bob. I'm with the Cornerstone Equity Planning.
यहाँ के शहरी बनना चाहते हैं, ग्रीन कार्ड हासिल करके बेहतर मुस्तकबिल की जानिब पेशकदमी करना चाहते हैं।
We specialize in the EB-5 immigration to the United States.
दी लैंड ऑफ अपॉर्चुनिटी अमेरिका EB-5 वीजा तिजारती और सरमायाकारी का वीजा है। अपना पैसा अपने कारोबार में लगाएं।
This program is tailored for the high net families who want to get to the US.
अपना पैसा अपने कारोबार में ही लगाएं और ग्रीन कार्ड हासिल करें। कम से कम 5 लाख अमेरिकी डॉलर आपको अमेरिका में रहने, बसने और किस्मत चमकाने का मौका फराहम करेगा।
I am happy to announce that our company is going to be touring South Asia in the near future. If you're looking to get in the United States as quickly as possible, please register today and schedule an appointment. EB-5 visa allows you to become a green card holder and later to become a citizen of the United States.
कम से कम 5 लाख डॉलर की कानूनी सरमायाकारी कीजिए और ग्रीन कार्ड हासिल कीजिए। पैसा भी आपका, तिजारत भी आपकी। अप्लाई EB-5 वीजा टुडे।
UWR, we believe education is a human right. United We Reach is a global nonprofit organization dedicated to providing educational opportunities globally for children who are deprived of this basic right. Please help empower a generation who will be the job creators of tomorrow. Support our mission and help create a nation.